Leader Jeffries, good morning. Good to see you. So after this deal was put together, after the president signed the legislation, he took great pains to thank Speaker McCarthy, to talk about the spirit of bipartisanship that he actually ran on during the presidential campaign of 2020. It sounds this morning with your labeling of Republicans as Team Extreme that spirit may have dissipated already. But do you take anything away from that process with hopes that more things can be done on a bipartisan basis, or was that a one-off because the stakes were so high for the economy?
Well, it was definitely not a one-off, and I think what we've seen going back to the last Congress through this Congress is that we'll continue to take the following approach, which is to say we're going to find common ground whenever and wherever possible with the other side of the aisle for the good of the American people. That's what we as Democrats do. We want to advance the ball for everyday Americans. And in order to do that, often, particularly in divided government, you got to find common ground. But at the same time, as we said from the very beginning of this Congress, we're going to push back against extremism whenever necessary. We can strike that balance. And if you think about the track record of success under the Biden administration, bipartisan infrastructure agreement, bipartisan gun safety legislation, more needs to be done, but bipartisan gun safety legislation for the first time in 30 years. Bipartisan Chips and Science Act to bring domestic manufacturing jobs back home to the United States of America. Bipartisan reform of the Electoral Count Act, bipartisan legislation to make sure we respect the right to marriage for everyone, and now a bipartisan resolution in saving our economy from a catastrophic default. That's a great track record of success that President Biden can now take to the American people, and Democrats will remain committed to finding that bipartisanship in the House whenever possible.
Jonathan Lemire.
Leader Jeffries, want to get your response, though, to a far more partisan endeavor, which is some of your Republican colleagues' efforts to investigate President Biden and his family. We heard from Congressman Comer in recent days disregarding, what he said, making clear that polls are what's driving some of this investigation. And now an effort from some Republicans to hold the FBI director in contempt. Can we get you to weigh in on that, sir?
Well, I think what we've seen is that individuals who pretend to be a party of law and order are really just a party of lawlessness and disorder. Joe's done a great job of pointing this out, every step of the way. These are people who supported a violent insurrection where there was an assault not just on the Capitol, but on Capitol police officers, and then refused to recognize their service, their bravery, their valor. So this is just part of that lawlessness and disorder that I think we've seen coming from far too many extreme MAGA Republicans on the other side of the aisle. They want to defund the FBI. They want to investigate FBI agents. Now they want to hold the FBI director in contempt. By the way, an FBI director that was nominated by Donald Trump.
Susan Page.
You managed to raise the debt ceiling without default. Congratulations on that. That was a test for President Biden, also a test for Speaker McCarthy. And there was some doubt beforehand that he could deliver his troops to do that and stay in office and avoid a motion to vacate the chair. What did you learn about Speaker McCarthy through this experience, and what does it tell us about politics going forward?
Well, Kevin McCarthy and I have had a very good relationship from the beginning. It's been an open and honest and a communicative relationship, and that started back in November. And will continue, I believe, as we continue through the rest of this Congress. I think we both concluded, there will be a lot of times where we can agree to disagree, strongly disagree at times, without being disagreeable, because, for the good of the institution, for the good of House Democrats, House Republicans, most importantly, for the good of the country, we should continue to find ways to work together in order to get things done. And that's been a commitment that I think Speaker McCarthy has had with me, certainly a commitment that I've had with him, and one that I believe will sustain itself.
I'm tempted to ask you about your footwear, but we'll leave that for...
Oh. No, tell us. Come on. Tell
He made a wave with his footwear choices.
I like
today.
In the Oval. It's okay. You touched on what I think is kind of the central dichotomy of the Biden presidency, which is, and Kevin McCarthy said this too, which is like, in private, this guy is a deft negotiator. He's very good. He's tough. The public image of him doesn't always portray that, especially the Republican caricature of him does not always portray that. So I'm wondering if you could sort of talk about that dichotomy. Obviously, poll after poll after poll shows that this president is not exciting the Democratic base. I think that's objectively true. It may change, but it's true right now. At the same time, you've listed all these achievements. You've talked about how good he was in these negotiations. What does he have to do? What does the White House have to do to translate that success that you're laying out right here into something that's tangible, especially for the voters of his own party?
Well, I think as we get closer and closer to the presidential election of 2024, and the Biden administration and President Biden himself gets out on the campaign trail, takes his case to the American people, we'll see what alternative emerges on the other side. But it's going to be an extreme alternative. And he'll be able to point out that, he's going to continue to build this economy that works for everyday Americans. He's going to fight for reproductive freedom because we believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. The other side wants to criminalize abortion care and impose a nationwide ban. We actually believe in democracy. We want to protect and strengthen Social Security and Medicare. The other side wants to end those things as we know them today, and they will continue to try to do that. We believe that everyone should pay their fair share. President Biden continues to make that point. The other side, is going to try to dramatically cut taxes for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, as they did with the GOP tax scam. So I think once there is a clear alternative in terms of what's the other vision for moving the country forward, President Biden will have a track record and a vision that I think will be very compelling to the American people.
A choice with the opposition and not a referendum on his own record?
Well, I think what we also saw during the midterm elections, where the expectation was that this would be a referendum that would result in a red wave for the other side of the aisle in 2022.
Gotcha.
Once again, President Biden defied expectations. It was barely a red ripple. When you think about it, we picked up a seat in the Senate, won governorships all across the Midwest and in Arizona, flipped legislative seats, including but not limited to in Michigan and in Pennsylvania, and the other side barely held on to the House of Representatives.
Kevin McCarthy had promised 50 seats a year earlier. And if the New York State legislature knew how to redistrict, Democrats, it just comes down to that. Democrats would be in control of the House, too.